Alright, dialing in 40 IDF dual Weber carburetors on a Volkswagen engine. This one happens to be a custom engine on a 2-liter build. I'm using the 40 IDF with the standard 28 Venturis, 50 idle jets. This one happened to come with 120 main jets, and I think I'm running a little bit lean. Hey folks, Easy Jeezy here. Been wanting to make this video for a long time, and what it's going to be about is a particular set of 40 IDF Weber carburetors that I purchased at a swap meet. They were well worn, a lot of parts missing, and I've been trying to put this video together for a long time, but I just can't seem to get it in the order I like. So I'm going to make another attempt to edit it, and there's going to be a lot of information here, and I think it's going to help somebody who's buying used Italian Weber carburetors. So hang in there with me, and we'll try to make sense of this. And I apologize if it turns into a long video, but there's a lot to cover, and there's a lot to this story. And just to recap for a little bit, it might be better for you to go to my channel page, the Easy Jeezy, and I've made some playlists, if you're really interested, about some engine builds and different carburation choices, and some of my most viewed videos are on the Weber carburetor, so I'm sure that's what you're here for and want help with. So let's get started. As I said before, when you're buying into this Weber IDF situation or Delloroto carburetors, they're similar. They both were Italian made. There were no automobiles imported into the US according to the book after 1980, and everything had switched over to fuel injection because of emissions and so forth, and it just worked better. But there's just a following for these carburetors, and they work so well when they're properly set up for the proper application. I've gotten a lot of emails from people asking, well, what kind of carburetor should I run on my Mazda rotary engine, or my 4-cylinder Honda engine, or one fellow was interested in the Harley Davidson application with the horizontal DCO model, and I have no experience in those. My primary extensive experience is on Volkswagen engines, and my carburetor of choice is the Delloroto 36 DRLA unit. This has just been an outstanding carburetor. I bought 2 sets of these about 25 years ago, I don't even remember, and they have worked flawlessly on the street, off-road, on a sand rail. They just take a licking and kept on ticking. I've used it on high compression, or what I call high compression, 9.5 to 1, 2110 with a C35 cam and big valve heads. Used that on the sand for years and years and years in stock configuration, and it just worked outstanding. Take the same carburetor and bolt it right onto a stock 1600 dual port. And I did not have to change the jetting, and ran that thing on the street, and it worked outstanding. That's not going to happen. That's not going to work for everybody in every application. When you're got an off-road car, you're not going on level ground for hours at a time. You're bouncing around, and you're going to be running rich. So I wouldn't recommend just taking this out of the box, because you can't get them brand new in the box, and bolt them on a street car Volkswagen engine of any size and just figure they're going to run for you. You have to read your spark plugs, and you have to listen to the motor and feel how it operates. And a lot of this tuning is seat of the pants, but there's some excellent books out there. This is the one for Dellorotos, and the Delloroto carburetor, which is no longer available complete and new as a kit, was the one brand and the one setup that you could take out of the box and those babies would work. On the Webers, you're going to have to pull a lot of that information out of the book, because the Weber carburetor was used by the Italian auto industry, and they put it on so many different types of engines and different applications. There's just no standard setup, and they didn't cater specifically to the Volkswagen market like Delloroto did. So you don't know what you're going to end up with as far as jetting. There was just no, they were made for different types of cars. So recently with this car, I have a little homemade dune buggy here, Manx style car, and although I love my Dellorotos dearly, it was difficult to access these idle jets, and I don't care what kind of carburetor or air cleaner setup you're going to use. If you're going to go off-road in the sand and dirt and dust, you're eventually going to start getting something in that, and it's going to get caught in your idle jets. And the idle jets are the small screws underneath these main jet stacks. So you had to take the air cleaner off, and usually they were caked with whatever environment you were running in. And this is the perfect setup in a sedan, because you could get to it from the top. If you use the Weber setup, which we'll look at here shortly, the Weber idle jets you had to access from the side, which there was always sheet metal in the way, made it real difficult. But that's exactly what's going to work for this application, as you'll see here shortly. So hang in there with me. We're going to cover all the adjustments and do an in-car drive, and we'll get this done together. So let me take you off the stand here. So the overall car, you can see how the fiberglass covers up the carburetor, which is what I want, because if I'm parked and I get in the rain or snow situation, because I live close to the mountains, I want that protection, so I'm not soaking my air cleaners in water. I don't have a deck lid to put over this. So at any rate, the reason I like this Weber carburetor is because the idle jets are accessible. There's one here, and there's one under this fuel line right over here. You take those out and you can clean them. Weber uses small idle jets. They're a size 50. They get clogged a lot easier than the Delloroto, which comes with a 60. And they do use similar location for the idle needle screws, and the Webers are much more sensitive to how many turns. It's like 1.5, turns, whereas the Delloroto is like 3.5. It has a much longer, slower taper to the needle, and this barrel would be on this side. You don't have to worry about this small screw with the nut on it. That is a bypass screw that goes around the butterfly, and when you do your initial tuning, all those should be closed. There's going to be one on each barrel. This little device right here is to hook up your vacuum for your distributor if you were using a stock style distributor. They have a nice little screw that comes in it. Now, with this particular setup, you'll see that the spring is not where the linkage is connected. The spring is on this side. So I would call this carburetor a right-handed carburetor. The Delloroto kits, when you bought them, when they were available, had a tag that designated left and right. Let's take a look real quick over here on another setup. Okay, you see here on this Delloroto, these are 36s, and the return spring is right here, right where the linkage mounts. You come over here to the other side, same setup. The sorry about that. The return spring was on this side. There was no vacuum port available to hook a distributor up on this carburetor. It was made to be a right-handed Volkswagen carburetor. This is the distributor side. This was tagged, and you can see it. Had the vacuum that would have gone to the distributor. This would be the left hand. Okay, we're going to go back over here and look at the Weber. This is the side this distributor's on. There's the vacuum port. Now we come over here to the other side. This is correct. This has got the return spring right here, but you'll see that it also had the vacuum port on it. They did not make this carburetor separate. You know, they didn't make a left and a right. They just wang these things out, and we shipped them this way. Now, we're going to get into jetting and tuning here a little bit later. I know this is already getting way too long, but this is important stuff. This is critical. When you have your throttle linkage tied in correctly like this to the spring side, you're not putting torsional pressure on those butterflies on the throttle shaft that goes the length of the carburetor. When you attach these carburetors to the manifold, you do not crank down on these base bolts, nuts, whatever, however yours is set up. You don't crank down on them to see how tough you are, you know. You can spray with some starting fluid after you've got it done to check for vacuum leaks, but you use a nice thick gasket and you tighten them down snugly, and call it good right there. You can, if your intake manifolds are not perfectly flat, you could cause stress in that carburetor and create some binding on the throttle shaft. Too many details, I know. Some guys are gonna hate this, other guys are gonna be loving it. Come over here to this side, and this is just the problem I described. Sorry about that. The return spring ends up on this side. So you've got tension here all the time. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. And you've got your throttle linkage connected to this side. So you're trying to overcome that spring at this end by twisting. And I'm talking, you know, how often you move your throttle. You're constantly moving your throttle. And over years of use and going off-road and banging it, it's not good. The other thing that you have to be careful of, especially in an off-road car or a street car, is your throttle stops, your throttle position. If this particular linkage is an old Gene Berg setup, when you mash the throttle completely, like so, see that bolt and screw right there? That becomes a stop. You adjust that by observing your throttle shaft when it's in the wide open position, and you're not torquing, you're not twisting that throttle shaft because it's stopping right here. When you get excited, when you're racing, or if you're just going through rocks, your foot's gonna be bouncing on that throttle, and that's how you ruin carburetors, because you just can't send these things in, and you know, you're gonna have to buy another set of carburetors or find one that isn't messed up. These screws and nuts and the throttle shaft itself, when you're looking at used carburetors, you have to check that out, and that's why, you know, a lot of them got taken off the car. That's why they're at the swap meet for sale, because somebody doesn't want them. These carburetors have ball bearings on the throttle shaft. If you over tighten this nut, that's why they have a little sheet metal insert with a tab on it, so that you don't have to over tighten it. You tighten it down snug enough where it doesn't bind, and you fold the tab over, and that keeps you from losing your nut. That's the size it needs to go. This is part of the Gene Berg linkage setup that I got, and I had to add that to this carburetor. Normally you'd probably be using one of the holes here, And I don't know of anybody else's linkage that has a built-in throttle return spring on the center of the shaft. You've got adjustment holes for travel. You've got the wide open throttle stop. But you know, look at this. This is a piece of angle iron, and it's got these nice little fittings on there. But you could make something similar using a Heim joint. You're going to have to be talented. You're going to have the tools and know how to do it, but it's got to be done. And both of these have got to match when you step on the throttle and when you let off the throttle. It's going to have to return completely, and it's going to have to open evenly on both sides. That's critical to getting these things to run right. But back to getting these things dialed in and set up. They usually come with the 50 idle jet, and that 50 idle jet usually works with the needle screw turned out about 1.5 turns. That would be a starting point. According to the book, when you adjust it, you use your idle throttle stop. This would be your idle adjustment screw. You want to leave the linkage disconnected from one carburetor. You don't want this thing running off of both carburetors, and every time you turn something on this side, it's going to affect the other side, and your idle and engine running is going to be all over the map. Do not do that. Leave one side disconnected, and this shouldn't even be touching the throttle shaft. The throttle plates should be completely closed, and you need to be running off the idle jets. It's going to run horrible. And as a side note here, if you have built yourself a fresh engine and you're going to do your initial startup, do not throw somebody's used Webers on there unless they've been on a similar engine that ran well and those carburetors were dialed in. You do not want to do the initial startup and cam brake in with some unknown carburation setup, because you're going to wipe all the lube off the cam and you're going to have camshaft break-in problems. Might not affect you right away. It might take some people have cam problems right off the get-go because they don't break them in properly. You need to work harden your lifters and your cam lobes so that they harden up. And the way the Berg book always talked about doing it was run it at 2,000 to 2,500 RPM for 20 minutes minimum. And if it's snapping, popping, sneezing, smoking, as long as you can keep it running and you got oil in it and oil pressure is good, you run it for that 20 minutes and then you shut it down and let it cool completely, preferably overnight. And then you can start addressing little issues after you've changed the oil the next day, because that initial startup is when you're going to get all the little high spots and edges and things off of your metal particles. And I usually do that 20-minute break-in and dump that oil and start off with fresh oil. Then you can start working on tuning it and getting your idle and your timing and all that sort of stuff. So don't take a chance with a fresh engine with unknown carburetors. Make sure that you get your break-in right. I'm tired of talking. I know you must be tired of listening. I got to take a little break here and edit some of this out. Thanks for watching and subbing, and I hope that this information is helpful to you that are struggling with your Weber carburetors.